por el contenido o lo expresado en el mismo.
Good morning and bienvenidos, Phoenix, Arizona. Welcome to another edition of Vanguardia America. I am your host, James Garcia. I want to thank you for joining us this morning. It is Saturday, July the 20th. Vanguardia America comes to you every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. The show is broadcast right here from the studios at La Onda 1190 AM, headquartered in North Central Phoenix. If you ever miss our show, just go to VanguardiaAmerica.com to find podcast episodes of all of our past shows. Now, in just a few moments, we will go to our weekly news roundup featuring stories about the Latino community from across the state and around the nation. But before that, we will go to our extended two-part interview with Lisette Trujillo and Joseph Darius Jafari about a community discussion that's being sponsored by the Arizona Mirror and Lookout, which is a news site, nonprofit news site that focuses on the gay and lesbian community, the LGBTQ plus community. They're having a discussion that's going to be called "Navigating LGBTQ plus Issues as a Parent." The panel discussion will happen tomorrow, Sunday, July the 21st, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at 101 North Central Avenue in Phoenix. The conversation is going to center on the parents of LGBTQ plus children who are navigating today's politics and cultural shifts. Lookout is a nonprofit news site in Arizona focused specifically on the queer community, and the Arizona Mirror, where I am a regular columnist, is a nonprofit news site covering state and national politics. Then we'll close the show on a lighter note with stand-up comic Armando Plasencia, host of the Barrios Locos comedy show at the Arizona Latino Arts and Cultural Center in downtown Phoenix. Barrios Locos has been hosting a Latino comedy night every third Thursday of the month for quite a few months now, and they'll be performing tonight at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are on sale through Eventbrite or by going to the website for the Arizona Latino Arts and Cultural Center, or you can buy tickets at the door. I should give you a heads up, though, that they are nearly sold out. So if you're going to buy tickets, you want to buy them soon. That's what's on tap for the show, but first, the news. NBC News is reporting that Senator Bob Menendez has told close associates that he is thinking about resigning from Congress. Menendez was convicted of federal corruption charges earlier this week. He's been defiant for months in the face of calls from dozens of his Senate Democratic colleagues to resign. He appears now to have finally relented after the guilty verdict and growing threats to expel him if he refused. Menendez was convicted Tuesday on 16 federal counts related to using the power of his official position to enrich 3 New Jersey businessmen and benefit the Egyptian and Qatari governments. In exchange, he and his wife received cash, gold bars, payments towards a home mortgage, compensation for a low or no-show job, a luxury vehicle, and other items of value, according to prosecutors. Now, here's a story from NBC News Latino's Suzanne Gamboa. Facing calls to bow out of the presidential race, President Joe Biden was primed on Wednesday to speak to a usually supportive audience of Latino leaders and community organizers at the Unidos U.S. annual convention in Las Vegas. But minutes before his speech, it was announced that he had tested positive for COVID. Biden's appearance at the conference was announced by Janet Murguia, the group's president, who looked a little teary-eyed on stage and announced that the president had called her to say that he could not make the event. Phoenix City Councilman Carlos Galindo Elvira, who had snagged a front row seat for the speech, said the virus is not a sign that Biden should withdraw from the presidential race, as some Democrats have been calling for. Galindo Elvira said he was disappointed that he didn't get a close-up view of Biden, but, quote, that doesn't mean I'm not going to have a front row seat when history is made and he is reelected. Biden's scheduled speech, officially a White House event and not a campaign event, came just hours after a prominent House member, Representative Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, called on Biden to step down amid growing questions about Biden's age, health, and cognitive ability. The speech Wednesday was another chance for Biden to dispel those concerns while also shoring up Latino support and rallying community leaders he needs to help him energize and turn out Hispanic voters in November. Excuse me. Apologize for that. Apologize. In this year's tight presidential race, Biden's performance with Latino voters is critical. Although he won 65% of Latino voters in 2020, polls are suggesting that some of that support may be slipping. Before Wednesday's planned speech, the White House announced that Biden would sign an executive order establishing a White House initiative to strengthen Hispanic serving institutions. There are 600 HCIs, as they are called, universities and colleges where at least 1/4 of the full-time undergraduate students are Hispanic. And then this story, also from Suzanne Gamboa at NBC Latino. Republicans who are billing their national convention as a show of unity after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump focused the second day of the event on immigration, an issue that generates a lot of vitriol and among some of Trump's strongest supporters. Since he first entered presidential politics in 2016, trashing Mexicans as rapists and vehicles of drugs and crime, Trump has made immigration an us and them cudgel. His rhetoric set the tone for many of the other GOP leaders, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who was part of Tuesday's lineup, and who signed a sweeping state immigration law that gave local and state officials immigration enforcement powers. Trump was addressing the issue of immigration in his rally on Saturday last week when a shooter opened fire against him, killing one spectator and leaving two others critically injured. Trump had turned his head slightly to the right to view a large chart of immigration statistics, which he has credited with saving his life. Trump frequently stirs his base by railing against violent crime committed by immigrants, and the theme on the second day of the convention was called Make America Safe Once Again, and it was built on the often misinformed portrayal of immigrants. Trump's usually fact-challenged immigration messaging has found a wider audience this election year as border officers and communities across the country have been grappling in the past few years with large numbers of people arriving at the border, often seeking asylum. As GOP attendees began rallying around Tuesday's Make America Safe Again immigration theme, border arrests were at the lowest of Biden's presidency, plunging 30% last month. Representative Veronica Escobar, Democrat from Texas, who was on a conference call Tuesday with America's Voice, an immigration advocacy group, criticized Trump and the RNC. They want the American public to fear and loathe immigrants. The language they use is alarming, and it's the same language and rhetoric that Donald Trump used in his first term, said Escobar. It is the same language and rhetoric that inspired a white supremacist to carry out the August 3rd, 2019 massacre in El Paso, Texas. This time around, Trump hasn't changed his rhetoric and has actually ramped it up. He has said immigrants are, quote, poisoning the blood of the country, and that countries are emptying their jails and prisons and insane asylums when they send their immigrants here. And now this from Axios Latino. An overwhelming majority of Latino voters in a recent survey said they feel used as pawns by politicians who don't actually care about them. Latino voters are a key and rapidly growing part of the electorate, yet both parties have faced criticism for poor engagement efforts and for sidestepping issues that Hispanics say matter to them, including inflation and personal economics. 80% of the Latino respondents to the survey said they feel used by politicians, according to Axios Vibes survey, which is conducted by the Harris Poll. That was done last Tuesday. Harris Poll CEO John Gerzama said the survey shows Latino voters know they have immense political power and, quote, not only have they arrived, they want to be reckoned with and they want to be heard and understood. This election cycle, the Democratic Party has invested millions in ads and other outreach programs aimed at Latinos and touting their economic advances and the fight for abortion rights under the Biden administration. But the GOP has been steadily making gains with Hispanics over the past several years, in part with consistent messaging on the economy and border security. Also from Axios, 10 of the country's communities with the largest share of Latino residents have a poverty rate that's 50% higher than the national average, an Axios review of the latest census estimates has found. The data shows millions of Hispanics continue to struggle economically despite overall declines in U.S. Latino poverty rates. Latinos make up 19% of the population in the U.S. and are set to form a plurality of the country's population by mid-century. But experts say a lack of discussion on Latino poverty is allowing inequalities to fester and grow. An Axios analysis of 10 census-designated places with 100,000 or more residents with the highest percentage of Latinos had an average poverty rate of 18.7%. That's well above the nation's overall poverty rate of 12.5% and higher than the 17.2% for all Latinos based on Census Bureau figures from 2022. East Los Angeles, an unincorporated community, and Laredo, Texas, had poverty rates of 17.2% and 21%, respectively. Both communities have the nation's highest percentage of Latino residents at 96%. And finally, Spotify has launched a Spanish-language version of its AI DJ, a generative AI feature that delivers personalized music playlist along with narration based on the voice of a real person. Roughly 500 million people speak Spanish around the world, and native speakers are the second largest language group in the United States. The Spanish language speaking voice, Livy, as it's called, is available for Spotify Premium members in dozens of markets where the English language AI DJ X is available. It's also expanding to premium users in Spain, Argentina, Colombia, and Mexico. Spanish language music, meanwhile, has become a global phenomenon. In 2023, Bad Bunny's Un Verano Sin Ti was the most streamed album on the planet on Spotify, while the most streamed song of the summer worldwide was Ella Baila Sola by Eslabón Amado and Peso Pluma. That's our news for this week. We'll be back in just a few moments with our extended interviews. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to Vanguardia America.
Blanca Irives y John Herrera te invitan a escuchar Mi Dinero, Tu Dinero.
Hola, soy Blanca Irives y te daré información sobre impuestos, el número ITIN y todo lo relacionado con tu negocio como licencias y LLC.
¿Qué tal? Soy John Herrera, agente con licencia de seguros autorizado por el estado de Arizona. Te diré cómo proteger tu auto, casa, vida y negocio.
Los martes a las 9 de la mañana con American Family. Persigue tus sueños. Nosotros los protegeremos.
AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection presenta Hablemos de Salud, Dinero y Amor. Una conversación interactiva sobre temas relevantes para hispanos latinos. Acompáñanos los martes de 1 a 2 de la tarde por esta estación y por Facebook en AARP Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Arizona Hispanic Connection.
Únete a la conversación.
Porque la información
traspasa fronteras. Somos Yasmín Islas
y Enrique Delgadillo.
Y te invitamos de lunes a viernes de 2 a 3 de la tarde
a sintonizar
Noticias sobre la Mesa.
Noticias sobre la Mesa.
Tu radio sin
fronteras.
En esa hora donde Arizona y Sonora nos hermanamos
para resaltar nuestras raíces
y nuestras costumbres, porque llevamos a México en la sangre.
De 2 a 3 de la tarde te esperamos.
Por La Onda 1190 AM.
Back to Vanguardia America. Welcome back. I'm your host, James Garcia. Thank you for joining us. We are going now to an extended interview, a two-part segment featuring a couple of individuals who are here to talk about a panel discussion that's going to be coming up actually tomorrow on the 21st from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the 1 in 10 office building, 1000 North Central Avenue. This is an event that is being hosted by Lookout and the Arizona Mirror. Lookout is a nonprofit news site that focuses on the queer community. Arizona Mirror does politics here in the state. And full disclosure, I am a columnist for the Arizona Mirror. With us today will be Lisette Trujillo, a Tucson small business owner and a community advocate for transgender youth and families, and a volunteer at the Southern Arizona Gender Alliance. And then also Joseph Darius Jafari, is that correct?
Yep.
Do I have that correct? Jafari is the executive editor of Lookout, and they are here to talk about the panel discussion that's going to be happening tomorrow, and then just the issue broadly about parents in transgender children and LGBTQ children, and particularly in this sort of fraught time with the politics and kind of culture clashes that we're experiencing these days. So I want to thank you so much, Joseph, for being with us today, and thank you, Lisette.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So the discussion that's going to be had tomorrow, first of all, it's called Navigating LGBTQ plus Issues as a Parent, which would be an interesting enough topic in and of itself, if it were not for also the fact that we are in incredibly tumultuous times with regards to these issues and the kinds of issues that are impacting our youth, and in particular LGBTQ youth. So let's begin with you, Lisette. First of all, talk to us about why you wanted to be part of the panel discussion tomorrow.
First of all, thank you for having me on today. I'm really happy to be a part of this conversation. I was really happy that Joseph invited me. I'm in Tucson, and for the last, since 2018, we've been driving up to the state capitol to testify against anti-trans legislation that has bombarded or been brought into our state by different lobbies. And I think that for me, as a first generation Chicana, often the voices of our community at its intersections are not heard. And so I felt like this was a great opportunity to kind of give a different perspective. When my child came out, we were, my husband had not yet become a U.S. citizen, and so we were in a multi-status home, and it felt like a really scary time. My son will be 17 in August, and he has been advocating for trans youth and his own rights since he was 9. And so I think it's important for people to understand how other people are being impacted in our state by bad policy that is manufactured and paid for by lobbies and other organizations that shouldn't have so much power or say on the rights of Arizonans.
And may I ask, just to clarify, so is your child trans?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And, and so, Joseph, let's go to you in terms of the context of these discussions that we're having, the discussion about this that we're having today. It's tough enough to be a teenager anyway. It has not been, it's not as if before kind of the current political mood that we had eradicated homophobia or any kinds of, that kind of criticism of the LGBTQ plus community. But we are in an especially kind of heightened atmosphere with regards to the kind of hostility that's being expressed toward this community. What is the role that your publication plays and that you play perhaps on this issue, and why did you decide you needed to have this panel discussion?
Thank you for that question. So it's twofold, right? So one is what does Lookout do to kind of combat against the current rhetoric and the current challenges that LGBTQ plus people face across the state? And the answer to that question is simply reporting on everything that's happening, mm-hmm. right? And so I came from traditional newspaper backgrounds, nonprofit news backgrounds, and as an investigator, and time again, I was told by my editors, by executive leaders, that queer issues just weren't important enough to report on outside of pride parades and drag shows and whatever bad bills were happening.
Mm-hmm. And this was relatively recent?
Yeah, I left the Arizona Republic to do this just last year because the same kind of conversations were happening at the executive level. Mm-hmm. And so, we started and we kind of blew them out of the water with like eating their lunch, because the more stories that we've done pushing back against narratives, or at least just asking questions that nobody had been asking before, we have gotten more support now. We have an incredibly large audience that like would have never happened if we hadn't started, and all these different news outlets just haven't thought about attacking before. Your second point of like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing these discussions? I think most news outlets actually do kind of panel discussions, and it's important to kind of make sure you're doing outreach to the community. But, we are not a traditional news outlet in the fact that not only are we a nonprofit, but we're actually the only investigative news outlet for queer communities across the nation. And one of the big things that sets us apart is we really want to hear from people within the community what's happening. We did some research at the very top of when we started, and people said, we don't want to just know about the news. We want to know how to get activated. And so the conversation that's happening tomorrow is part of a series of conversations over the summer called our Summer of Solutions series. And what it is essentially we get experts like Lizette to our panel, and we have the community kind of talk to them about what issues they are facing. So it's a typical panel discussion with a lot of audience feedback, and there are breakout sessions at the very end. And the entire purpose is that we want the community to leave with a tool that they can go home with and activate their community in some kind of way. It's community organizing at its very base level.
And of course, to clarify for the audience, this is a nonpartisan
100%.
activity, and your publication is nonpartisan.
Yeah,
of course.
I mean, our last one was really, it was difficult. It was all about politics and the future of queer politics in Arizona, and we had the former Chief of Staff for Doug Ducey there. They had caused a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but I think they were important because at the end of the day, you're still giving people perspectives they would not have normally heard.
How many discussions will be part of the series?
5 altogether.
5 altogether before the end of the summer. And how many have you had so far?
This will be our second one tomorrow.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and again, even though you're obviously a nonpartisan publication, and this event is nonpartisan, part of the context of this conversation is that hundreds of laws around the country are being pushed by almost exclusively Republican leadership and legislators around the country. Lisette, in your opinion, what's happening there? Why has the Republican Party taken such a harsh tone now? Why are they essentially lashing out at the LGBTQ plus community?
Well, in 2018, I believe it was Politico published an article called Trump's Winning Wedge Issue. And I want to say, I can't remember the state, but they spent $38,000 testing anti-trans rhetoric and running on certain platforms like sports and gender-affirming care. And they found that because many people did not know trans people or thought they didn't know trans people, that induced fear that brought them to the voting polls. And so, this has been kind of a long experiment on their end, where they've funded millions of dollars in anti-trans legislation and anti-LGBTQ legislation. I think it's because it's easy. I think it's really important for people to understand that the manufactured debate around trans rights and LGBTQIA rights are not dissimilar to arguments that have been used in our own communities, right? We understand that people who cannot use public facilities like bathrooms can't exist in public space because you can't tell your body when and where it needs to go to the bathroom. And so I like to connect the dots between the Chicano rights, Chicano student blowouts in 1968. That was about equitable education, language accessibility, access to public accommodations. Those are the same debates we're having around trans youth, whether that's them using bathrooms at school, participating in sports, or being able to use the correct name in their classroom or correct pronouns. I remember hearing stories from my parents or loved ones about having their names changed in the classroom, right? Like if you were Maria, you were Mary. If you were Pedro, you were Peter. And so it's all about erasure in these public spaces because they're really, really aware that proximity changes hearts. So if kids are in proximity to diverse people all throughout their schooling, they're going to have bias reduction just by knowing diverse people. And so I think, the Republicans have been really smart about attacking gender affirming care and attacking sports and attacking DEIA because you can reduce people, specifically trans people, to just body parts, and you can tell scary stories, and you can push narratives that make people feel like they need to vote to ensure that the fabric of their surroundings don't change. But I like to remind people that, trans people have always existed, and so inclusion doesn't take away from
and
it.
this is the thing, right? That trans people and gay people have always existed. A reading of history in general, broadly, speaks to that. It provides evidence of that. So this is not a new condition in society, of course. We're going to take a break in just about a minute here, but I just wanted to, when we come back, I want to have you talk a little bit more, Lisette, about the intersection, because as you mentioned, your husband used to be undocumented or was not a citizen, at least at the time. And if there were two communities that were the most attacked, if you will, during the recent Republican National Convention, it may have been the LGBTQ plus community and immigrants. And so it's perhaps no accident that was the case. So in a few minutes, rather in a few seconds, we'll be back after a commercial break to talk again to Lisette Trujillo and Joseph Darius Jafari. Thank you so much. We'll be back in just a few minutes here on Vanguardia America.
¿Qué tal, amigos? Les saluda su amigo Ulises Ortiz para que se conecten con su programa ¿Qué onda, Arizona? De lunes a viernes de 4 a 6 de la tarde, donde tendremos noticias, deportes, entretenimiento y sobre todo mucha música. Tus tardes serán únicas en ¿Qué onda, Arizona? De 4 a 6 de la tarde. Conéctate con nosotros y sé parte de la historia aquí en tu casa a 1190.
Nos salimos de WhatsApp y llegamos a la radio. Todos los miércoles a las 9 de la mañana te invitamos un cafecito con noticias, recursos, entrevistas, arte, negocios, espectáculos y un piquete de buen humor. Porque el periodismo es más que información, es diálogo y complicidad. Únete a nosotros para una dosis semanal de café y charlemos, porque en Conecta Arizona tú eres nuestra inspiración. Escucha la hora del cafecito de Conecta Arizona todos los miércoles a las 9 de la mañana en la onda 1190.
¿Has intentado alcanzar el bienestar financiero, mental o físico y no lo has logrado? Soy Susana Díaz y te invito cada lunes a las 3 de la tarde a escuchar En Balance con Susana por la onda 1190M y junto a expertos encontremos las herramientas, técnicas y métodos que nos lleven a vivir mejor. Recuerda, cada lunes a las 3 de la tarde tenemos una cita en la estación más informativa de Arizona, la 1190 AM.
¿Tiene su dinero en orden? No, pues es hora. Yo soy Tomás Rivas de Marisol Federal Credit Union. Te invitamos los jueves de 3 a 4 de la tarde a tu hora de finanzas, donde vamos a hablar más de ahorros, los préstamos personales, casas, negocios y más. Te invito a que tengas una relación con tu banco. Los jueves de 3 a 4 por la onda 1190.
Welcome back. James Garcia, your host. Thank you for joining us on Vanguardia America. We're here with our guest again, Lisette Trujillo, who's a parent in Tucson of a trans child, very active in the community there on those issues, and I think now statewide as well. And Joseph Darius Jafari from Lookout, a publication that focuses on the LGBTQ community, a nonprofit news organization. And they're going to be having an event tomorrow here in Phoenix at 11 a.m. Starts at 11 a.m. at the 1 and 10 office building on North Central Avenue, 1001 North Central Avenue. It's called Navigating LGBTQ plus issues as a parent. When we left off, I was asking Lisette about the intersection between kind of the hostility that we're seeing expressed towards immigrants broadly, and particularly Latino immigrants and those coming across the southern border, and which has just heightened dramatically over the recent years. And maybe at one of its highest points now in a very, very long time. And then, of course, the stepped up antagonism and hostility towards LGBTQ plus youth, in particular trans youth. So talk to me about that intersection, Lisette, what you're seeing, because you lived at one point in a mixed status family and now are dealing with these issues.
Yeah, I think, at the time when my son came out, my husband had a visa. We were married. His parents had submitted his application for citizenship, I think in 1994 or 92. And many people know that process takes a very long time, right? So for years we were renewing his work visa until they got to his year. And so, when SB 1070 happened, we were really scared about what that would mean. How would people even...
just for our audience understanding, SB 1070 was the anti-immigrant bill that passed in 2010 by the state legislature that was ultimately almost completely repealed in the federal courts.
Yes, that was a very scary time for us. And when our son came out, we had a deep understanding that, that he had less rights than we did. My parents, too, came as immigrant children at 3 and 5. And so I wasn't far removed from that experience. And also recognized how lucky I was to just be born on this side of the border, right? And so I saw so many sacrifices that my family and even my husband and his family made to make a better life for themselves here. What I will say that I think is really, really important is the reason why I keep saying that this is a manufactured debate is because I can give a clear example. So in 2022, Stephen Miller, who used to be work under the Trump administration and is considered one of the architects of child separation at the border, started an organization called America First Legal. That year, America First Legal spent $500,000 in the month of October in print media and targeted ads on Spanish-speaking radio that fed anti-trans misinformation on gender-affirming care for trans youth. And so not only was he harming immigrants at the border and separating all these children from their families, he also was running anti-trans ads targeting our own community in Espanol, no? And using us as a way to, again, harm another part of our community, right? Because trans people are in all families, come from all backgrounds, and they are part of our families and part of our neighborhoods and part of our communities. And so that's why I say it's manufactured, and we're actually being used as pawns by these multi-million-dollar organizations that want to use us to vote against our own best interests and against the best interests of our loved ones.
And I was talking off the air with Darius about, with Joseph about the fact that, historically, politically, these stories, these kinds of cycles of hostility towards disenfranchised populations or politically weak populations, if you will, come around again and again. Joseph, talk about that. Talk about the history against trans people over the decades that you've seen, or the centuries, really, in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, none of this rhetoric is new, right? I mean, I kind of mentioned earlier off air that this is like a collective amnesia of Americans of what has happened even in our own country, because when it comes to things like, maybe not in our country, but in World War II, for example, The Nazis said that trans people were dangerous to children, and so they burned all their books, right? Kind of seeing similar stuff with book bans right now. In the 50s, the Eisenhower administration said gay people were dangerous to children, and so they shouldn't be teachers, right?
Yep.
In the 90s, you had the Anita Bryant movement of save our children because gay people are dangerous to children. Let's keep them out of all public access facilities. Let's make sure they can't do much outside of their own private lives. None of this is new, right? This is all recycled, recanned things. Even Prop 8, in California, which, banned gay marriage or same-sex marriage in California, even their excuse was these people are dangerous to children. Don't let them, quote, infiltrate your life. And it's all lies. It's all based on the premise of lies. There's no truth or evidence behind it. And yet it's effective, right? It's incredibly effective. It's been effective decades later. But again, we have this collective amnesia around it. And the same stuff can be used towards immigrant communities. I'm a first generation Middle Eastern, person, and my family,
and certainly there's been hostility expressed by the
Trump administration. I just think about during the first Muslim country ban, my father was back in Iran, and I was really worried, is he going to be able to get back in? And now there's a worry of if that happens again, how do we protect ourselves to make sure that my father can go back home and I can go visit and all these different things, because it's
just so the audience is clear, the conversation that we're having is a fact-based conversation in the sense that the predominant core base of the Republican Party and conservatives out there who may not be part of the Republican Party itself is predominantly, in terms of its power base, white and male. It's just the makeup of it, predominantly, overwhelmingly. And in order to secure their support, it seems like the party has just gone off the deep end and decided the people we're going to attack who are the folks at whom we feel may be the least politically powerful, whether it's the Muslim community or whether it's gays and lesbians or immigrants in general. And
trans people part of this conversation.
And trans people are sort of the most attacked.
They're the most attacked.
It's really
shocking. It's because
to me
that, for the same reason that the general community was attacked in the 90s, in the early thousands, even in the 70s, it's seen as such a small community, and it was much smaller back then.
Yes.
Because people weren't out there, afraid because of a number of different social issues. Of course, we have more people now, more than ever, who are actively out and proud about it, or fighting back about it. So when you think about, when you have a larger number of LGBT people, coming out and being proud about it, that number is actually largely bisexuals, lesbians, and gays. What the smallest number of that population is intersex people and trans people. So they are the easiest ones to kind of target.
Yeah, and in some ways, maybe they're the easiest ones to spot or to identify. And I worry, Lisette, perhaps people like those of us speaking right now on the air who don't want the LGBTQ community to be discriminated against, were we lulled somehow into not a complacency, but did we somehow believe after the Supreme Court essentially legalized gay marriage that that things were going to continue to get better? And in fact, it seems as if it's only gotten steadily worse. Your thoughts, Lisette?
Oh. Well, I mean, this is going to be an unpopular answer, but the legalization of gay marriage only really supported LGBT people in getting married. It was based in assimilation. And so often when you're talking about people who may be gender nonconformant or, who don't assimilate fully, then you're going to continue to see discriminatory policies pushed against them. You're going to continue to see discrimination. I think, I also think it's really important to note, because you were talking about the percentage of trans people and trans people who are visible today. Trans people make up less than or around 2% of the population. There are 7,300 trans youth, 13 to 24 in the state of Arizona. That's still like a large population of kids and young adults. And I think you're seeing more and more youth because their parents are my age. And I remember the AIDS epidemic, and I remember watching the AIDS quilt, and I remember having friends in high school who were afraid of coming out. I went to Catholic school, who weren't able to come out until later in life, because for fear of rejection. I remember being that young person who said, I'm not going to do that to my child. And I think that that's where I go back to that proximity changes hearts. It's important for people to see our family and to see our family and see how much we love our children. Like that was the one thing my husband always said, like, how we love and affirm our child will be how the people around us love and affirm our child. And those who refuse to will no longer be a part of our life. And I think that that proximity and that commitment to loving our child and the commitment that other parents are putting forward in protecting and loving their children is changing the ways in which we talk about trans youth and LGBTQIA people. But it's also giving the right, or the more conservative right to say, oh, look, this is new, when really it isn't. It's just that we come from a background where we saw a whole population of people dying, and saw the effect of discrimination.
And may I just point out, of course, that I think if, especially in these times when we're asking ourselves about the viability and survival of our own democracy, there may be no more democratic act than to attack people simply based on their sexual identity or all of that, right? I mean, it's just not, it's completely contrary to, I think, what the country is supposed to stand for, but it's happening now. If Joseph, you could close about what do you want the takeaway to be? We've got about 1 minute, but the takeaway from this panel discussion, what do you want that to be?
Oh my gosh. Well, I really want the takeaway to be giving, like I said, the entire point of these is to give people tools to come back to their homes, their neighborhoods, and use what they've learned to strengthen their communities. And, the hope is that people come to the panel tomorrow, come to the discussion tomorrow, and do exactly that. I really hope that the idea is that people learn that as a community, we all have tools together. If we can learn from each other and take something away and kind of stand on each other's shoulders, we might be able to build something that is a bit more resilient in the future. And so that when attacks like these come for our community, we have each other and we have the tool set to really combat that misinformation, that disinformation, and really strengthen ourselves through numbers.
And can you close with just some basic information about if folks are interested in these issues?
Yeah.
How can they find out more? How can they find out about your publication, certainly, but even more than that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna plug, of course, Lookout. So we're
30 seconds.
So you can find us on lookoutphx.org. And all of our stuff is free because we're a nonprofit. We don't believe in putting things behind paywalls. But if you want to learn more, I really suggest coming to the panel tomorrow, learning about it. We're going to have it streamed online through our Facebook, also at Lookout PHX.
Okay. Oh, it'll be streamed. Great.
Yep. And so then so you could learn a lot from there, and then hopefully you can learn some more organizations and tools and opportunities to get involved through there.
Okay, thank you so much. Lisette Trujillo is a Tucson small business owner, parent of a trans child, and active on these issues. She'll be at that panel discussion tomorrow. Joseph Darius Jafari is the executive director of Lookout, a queer-focused nonprofit newsroom that aims to push LGBTQ+ stories to the front of people's minds. Thank you both sincerely for being on the air today with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pendiente, mi gente. Cada lunes te presentamos una vitrina latina en el Valle del Sol. Aprendemos sobre las problemáticas y realidades de nuestros países en las Américas, su acontecer, expresiones artísticas y los recursos que están a la disposición de nuestra comunidad. Pendiente, mi gente, lunes a las 9 de la mañana por la Onda 1190.
Hola, soy Iris Ginan de Iris Consulta. ¿Me acompaña en mi equipo?
Edwin Zúñiga.
Iris Consulta es un programa donde hablaremos de diversos temas.
Con enfoque a las familias y negocios para empoderar el valor latino.
El conocimiento es poder. Te esperamos todos los sábados de 9 a 10 de la mañana por la Onda 1190. Iris Consulta.
Cada día podemos aprender algo nuevo. También tenemos la capacidad de desaprender un viejo hábito. Y mejor aún, desarrollar la capacidad de reaprender, es decir, de cambiar paradigmas o creencias limitantes para actualizar. Es una decisión. Así que si decides, podemos aprender juntos. Tenemos una cita en Diálogo con Mirna Pineda, tu espacio de aprendizaje y superación, de lunes a viernes a las 10 de la mañana. Acompáñanos y gracias por tener el buen gusto de mantenerte bien informado.
Welcome back. I'm your host, James Garcia. We're going to end the show on a lighter note, hopefully maybe with a couple of jokes from our guest. My guest is Armando Plasencia, known as Mando Man. Is that correct? Mando Man? Is that your stage name? And he's here to talk about comedy, and specifically the fact that there's a comedy show tonight at the Arizona Latino Arts and Cultural Center, which starts at 7:30, doors open at 6:30, and you may still be able to get tickets online through Eventbrite. And if not, you may be able to scrounge them at the door, but I do know the tickets have gone fast. So Armando, I wanted you to just talk about tonight's show briefly, but also really talk about the fact that you've been doing this once a month comedy show. And I'd love to hear also about your background. In fact, let's start with your background. And so first, how long have you been a comic, and how did you get into this business?
Well, funny story. I've been doing comedy about 9 years now. Mm-hmm. Started off just trying to support a friend of mine. He had friends that produce local comedy shows, and we had nothing to do that night. I told the wife, let's go support our buddy.
Nothing to do that night.
Nothing to do. So we go to the show. And of course, naturally, after a few cold beverages, I decided that somehow I could do that.
That's when everybody thinks they're really funny.
Everybody says, right? You know, once they're there, you know, I got a little courage, and then
you went on stage.
Well, actually, what they did was they invited me the next week.
Okay.
So I spent all week preparing, writing jokes. I probably wrote about 3
wait,
pages.
let me get this clear. So were you being funny in the audience, and they said, "Hey, you should come back next week"? Or?
So originally, like, I used to go to like major comedy shows. George Lopez, Gabriel Iglesias, all those. So it was something
as an audience member.
As an audience member. So it's something that you don't think you could really do because they're professionals. Yeah. But when you see people do it locally, you're like, okay, well, this isn't, you know, this is something that's attainable. So I was like, okay, let me try that. So I got a little bit of courage, and then I wrote like 3 pages of jokes, and I found out the hard way that it's not easy. It's really not. It's you know, especially Latinos, especially we're funny in general. Just this is how we do with our family. You know, we're always joking. We're poor, so we gotta laugh. We gotta. There you go.
Right.
So we but putting comedy on stage is a little bit different.
Just so I'm clear, so you went and you wrote 3 pages of funny stuff, what you hoped was funny stuff.
I hoped was funny.
Did you think you were funny before you went that night? And did you sort of feel like for a long time, maybe I could do that?
I enjoy making people laugh. Always have enjoyed making people laugh. So I'm always looking for something humorous to talk about. So,
and when was that? When did you go on stage for the first time?
This was 9 years, probably like what is it? 2014, 15.
Okay. And what's been happening in your career since then? I mean,
I've been pretty blessed. Yeah, I've been pretty blessed. I've traveled around the country, performing comedy from LA to Texas, New York, working with some pretty big names in comedy, especially Latino comics, you know, some of our kind of great.
Anyone I would recognize that's still alive? Because I know a lot of the old comics.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm not that old, but no. I mean, I'm
talking about Red Buttons.
No, that's way before my time. But I know who you're talking about. No. I've worked with guys like Willie Barcena, Steve Trevino, Juan Villarreal in Texas. They're in the comedy world. You would know who these guys are because they've done the Tonight shows, HBO specials, Showtime specials. But you know, that's just how comedy works. But I've been real fortunate to have a little bit of success just in the comedy.
Right. And then are you writing most of your own?
All my stuff is
You write all your own
90% of what I joke about is actually happened in real life.
Okay. Yeah.
So I take a lot of stuff from my life and being a father, a husband, you know, Latino. I'm a big dude. You can't tell on the radio, but
they can tell from
They can tell from my voice. I got a bass in my voice. but you know, so a lot of it comes from that perspective and things that happen on the day.
Are you so talk about the comedy series now? I understand that it's been going on for a few months. And what are you trying to achieve with the series at Lock?
Well, so the good thing is, and shout out to we're working with Arizona Barrio Stories online social media platform.
Facebook platform that's done very well recently.
Yeah, we're just taking off, and just it's a really good platform sharing Latino kind of culture and whatnot from on the Facebook platform. As well as working with the Arizona Latino Arts Center, Cultural Center. So what it does, we do it every month, third Saturday of every month. We put together a great lineup, super funny comics, a different show every time.
And you've had a different show every time, and I'm impressed by the fact that there are so many people available for your shows. I didn't realize there were that many, and most of them are Latino. Like every once in a while, you have like a Latino adjacent.
I try to mix it up. I do try to mix it up.
Yeah.
So what I like to do is I like to obviously give Latino comics an opportunity to showcase their talents, but also we're producing a show for a Latino kind of a Latino audience, right? We're going to get heavy Latino audience members, so we want to show them funny comics that may not be Latino. So we're just trying to.
You're saying non-Latinos are funny too? Is that
well, they are. They can be. You know.
So I went to one of your shows, and I want to come again soon. But there was an African American guy there that night, and so sometimes you have people who are not Latino are part of
100%. Yeah. Well, I got a lot of friends in comedy. You know, a lot of funny people. And so, we try to support each other by giving them, time to put their talents in front of audience members, maybe gain some fans and some followers. So that's just the name of the game. That's what we do.
You've been in sort of this business about 9 years, you're saying. Has it changed even in those 9 years in terms of the number of Latino comics who are here available in the area?
Definitely. I think stand-up comedy kind of has taken off over the last few years. It's blowing up. So, and it's funny because our options as adults for entertainment nowadays, it's kind of, it's just so little, so many few choices, so stand-up comedy is kind of blown up into, I think maybe had to do with pandemic. I don't know, but we're there's a lot of
people dying made people
millions of people sitting at home wondering what to do with themselves. Maybe started writing jokes or something. But they just want to get out of the house. That twist on the maybe
people funny.
They just maybe want to get out of the house. So let's take anything. So. But it's blown up.
But you've seen it, not just, and I think we can clearly both agree that comedy and stand-up comedy has blown up in the last 10 years, especially. But you've seen a growth in the number of Latino comics here, even
here
in this
locally.
region.
Here locally, for sure.
Yeah.
And it's funny because as the number of comics in Phoenix in general has blown up, so has Latino comics, and that's kind of why I like to do shows that are geared towards a Latino audience, because just like society, we're represented a certain percentage, and so that's what I like to do.
I noticed I've said this recently, and I'm a playwright, so I do creative work myself, and so I pay attention to these things in terms of diversity issues and all of that. And I've noticed on television, at least, that right now there's the one Latino rule. Right, like every show on television practically can have one Latino, not two. Because I don't know, that would be a gang or something.
It makes people uncomfortable.
It's like maybe all the other people on the set is like, there's two people here, but at least the one person. I'm hoping we get past that soon.
I think we were. I think it used to be this kind of stereotype that Latinos are gardeners and construction workers.
That's changing.
That's changing, so that's why it's also following suit, because we're not just gardeners and construction workers.
We're cops, lawyers,
and gardeners and construction workers too,
and DJs and stand-up comedy,
and
gardeners and construction workers.
Yeah, we do it all. So we're kind of like we are kind of, growing into representing what the country is as well. So we're representing Latinos. We are representing what United States of America is.
Yeah.
So we're not just kind of being relegated into those corners of society.
Absolutely. Our visibility, of course, is greater. We're 1 in 5 Americans now.
We spend money.
And we spend real money.
We're starting to be educated. So that's kind of
many of us are educated. And apparently many of us are funny. because you have this pool of people that
I say it all the time.
Is it hard for you to put the show together every month?
I try to keep it diverse. I try to keep it not only diverse, but have a different look, a different vibe, each show. I like to keep the energy levels up. Some comics are super funny, but they may not be super energetic.
You don't want to low energy.
Real dry, right?
But low energy
I know dry comics that are hilarious they're more cerebral. So I try to mix them up. I do like that kind of comedy, but
who was that guy with the afro decades ago that spoke very slowly? Wright? Something.
Yeah. Stephen Wright.
Stephen Wright.
Very super funny.
Very funny.
Yeah. He was it. So that's the kind of thing. Comedy is subjective, and there's so many different styles. I like to showcase that. I do like to highlight Latino comics, but I also like to put on non-Latino comics who would speak to my core audience, which I'm thankful because I get a little bit of love here in Phoenix. Heavy Latino contingency that really supports me and what I do, and I'm thankful for that. So we just have a good time, man. We laugh about life.
That's great. So we've got about 30 seconds. Just wrap up with the details on the show.
So we got the Arizona Barrio Stories, Barrio Locals comedy show, sponsored by Gutierrez Law Firm. Shout out to him and the Gutierrez Law Firm. Francisco Gutierrez, yes.
Supporter of the arts. A lot of people.
He's big, man. He's phenomenal for the local community. So much love to him. But we do this third Saturday every month. Come on out, check out the show. It's always a good time. We have the Arizona Latino Arts Cultural Center. So the
downtown, 147 East Adams, across from the Hyatt.
Yes, sir. It's a great venue. We got cold beverages for you, some cold AC, so you guys come laugh, come hang out with us, have a good time. Tickets, I believe, are almost sold out. You can jump on Eventbrite right now and check out.
Look for Barrios Locals.
Comedies.
Okay, so we're going to go. Thank you so much for being here. Armando Plasencia is the host of Barrios Locals comedy show at Alak. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to the audience for being with us today on Vanguardia America.
La Onda 1190 AM.
Una estación de la Promise Company.